Welcome, everybody, to today's episode of the podcast. I am so happy today to have with us Fran Fontana, who is an amazing attorney in Colorado, who is really a thought leader and has graced us today with her presence. Thank you so much, Fran, for being here. I'm excited to talk to you today.
Well, thank you very much for that great introduction and for asking me to participate.
Yeah, I am really excited to hear, first of all, a little bit about your background. So just let's start with that. Like, tell us how, I always think it's interesting to know how people got into this work because most of us came at it in sort of a roundabout way. So what was that story for you?
Okay, well, I was a psychology major in undergrad and was thinking that I was going to go the route of being a family therapist. And one day, I won't go to the background of it, but I thought, what if I go to law school? It really was that my mother-in-law wanted my husband to go to law school and he did not. So I said, well, what if I go to law school? And so I did, long story short. And all I ever wanted to do was practice family law because it was a blending of where I started and then didn't love law school. It was a means to an end.
Okay.
Didn't like being how competitive lawyers were and that aspect of it. So I
Mm.
thought things will be different in family law. So that was in
Yeah.
1987 when I became a family law attorney.
I see too, by the way, I'm kind of peeking around at your bio. I see you grew up in Evanston, Illinois, which is where I went to college.
Oh,
So
yeah, isn't it? It's a great town.
it
I
is a great
loved
town.
growing up. I
It
loved growing up in Evanston, and it's beautiful, and, yeah, the Midwest is great.
Other than the freezing cold lake effect stuff, other than
Yeah,
that, I totally concur that it was a great place to go to school, and Evanston's grown a lot, but when I was there, it's a little smaller, but it's such a good, like, town and gown place, you know? So,
yeah, it
I love
it's
that,
it's
so
wonderful, and I went from there to the University of Iowa where I met my husband,
okay.
and then ended up in Denver again, because it was the only place we could agree on. So we came to Denver, went to law school in Denver, and been here ever since I started law school.
Okay, so you're like a lot of people kind of fall into family law later. I know I did. I didn't go to law school and think, oh, I think I took one family law class in law school.
Mm.
But you were more purposeful in that. It sounds
Yes.
like,
Yes, and I was fortunate that I could do it my whole career. I mean,
yeah.
like, my first job was as a family law attorney, so it was awesome.
I try so hard to not use the child custody language for the same reason. It's like it's not a dog. People, we don't own this thing, right? This is a human with we don't need to use the word custody, but it's difficult because as I've been doing the podcast and working on my own firm and website and things like that, I get feedback constantly from all these marketing people that is what people are Googling, right? That they're
Yeah.
constantly looking for custody. So I feel that rub of, the fact that is what people call it, even though I completely agree that it's a broken term that should
Yeah.
use. So if anybody sees that in my labeling of anything, you can blame the marketing team, not me.
Well,
Right? I get
and
it.
it is hard when you're dealing and I know that you deal with a lot of the AFCC people, it is custody in other places, and
Yeah.
so sometimes we're like, "Well, everybody gets what that means."
Yeah.
But, when that change came into play in Colorado, the idea was, I'm married 42 years, and I raised 2 children and not been through a divorce, but we had a parenting plan. We just never had to write it down. We
Right.
never had to
That's
divvy it
interesting.
up, and we didn't have but everybody has a parenting plan. So if your
Yes.
client comes in and you say, what we need to do is we need to have a parenting plan at the end of the process that's in writing.
I
So
like
talk
that.
to me about how you allocated. So the language speaks well to talking to clients if attorneys would just learn to talk to clients the right
Right.
way.
Like humans.
Yeah, like, how
Yeah.
did you allocate these responsibilities? Like,
Yeah.
who did what? Who did what? I tell
Yeah.
everybody this funny story that, and I think my husband is, but was a great dad and great partner in raising kids. We were both working, but was I primary? Sure. Like,
Yeah.
I was the woman. Like, and I remember the story when I was in court and my husband had to drop the kids off at daycare And then the daycare was calling me at the end of the day and they were like, the van's there. Your daughter's not getting on the bus. We don't want to send them to leave yet. And I was mortified, absolutely mortified because my daughter hadn't acted to school activity. So I
Yeah.
called my husband and I'm all on fire and I'm like, so what you didn't put in the book that she had blah, 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 blah. And he very calmly and very forthrightly said, oh my, you didn't remind me.
Oh,
And I was about to blow, and then I
yeah.
thought, okay, that's fair.
I do believe that the best judges are really problem solvers. And we do have some people who are really great problem solvers still. They do more active case management, they set more status conferences. And I do think it makes me reflect a little bit on my role and the sort of this emerging role of doing CLR work, this child legal representative work. Because while you're not going to a judge, at least you have um, somebody who's out listening to everybody and then
Mhm.
just kind of coming back with some sanity, hopefully. And I keep saying to people, like, don't be a CLR if you aren't a good negotiator and if you're not trying to be that role. That's the best role for a CLR is to be a sounding board for everybody, to not be against anyone, but be really attempting to navigate this in a way that can bring some problem solving to it. So I think maybe that's why it's taking off a little bit more since we don't have the courts doing that so much. But that still doesn't get us far enough because, the way our system is set up is so adversarial and litigious. And I think to your point, it's not just that the judges don't have this training, like attorneys
Right.
don't have this training. Like they
Well,
don't know, most of them don't know that most of them are not participating in AFCC in these great conferences. Most of them are not listening to the mental health professionals and they're just doing their like litigation thing, and I think genuinely they believe and they've been trained to do it this way, and they think they're doing it well for clients because it's just the way they've been doing it, but there there is a real dearth of, like, what children need, attachment, the idea that attachment of children needs to be prioritized over just the way we've been handling our regular sobriety approaches in terms of just
right.
bring people, that was, like, earth shattering, right? Because 'Cause we're just like close it down, litigate it, right? So, I
And
find it
punish
really
and punish
interesting.
people and
Yeah,
but and the thing is that um I come up against this a lot with other lawyers who feel that we're supposed to advocate. And if you're advocating, that's somehow at odds with problem solving. And I'm like, no, it is a terrific interface. And here's the thing, Krista, I love to go to court. I mean, I
yeah,
think I do good when I'm in court, but guess who doesn't? My client,
exactly.
because it's a hard, difficult process. It's costly. And judges, you know, they're they're making decisions like this with both hands tied behind their back, with 4 hours of information within the rules of evidence. I mean, I said early on in my career that if I have a contested case with regard to children, there has to be an expert. There has to be, it's now called a child and family investigator. Back then, we hodgepodged it. And I did that work back then.
Mhm.
Um, and or a parental responsibility evaluation because I need somebody. And now we're using CLRs more. There are certain attorneys who don't who we're gonna build billable hours. You know what the hardest thing for attorneys to do is to actually have conversations with their attorneys, their clients when they're really emotional, and to learn about the stuff that may not be able to be introduced in court, but will help you figure out how to work this case through the system. And you know what? That's the most important stuff. That is the most important stuff. So I know that there's a lot of models where attorneys turn over the day to day hand holding, they call it. I don't call it that, to their staff. They don't develop a relationship with their client. They set it for mediation through a mediation process that's limited or that they know won't get resolved because they'll make more money by going to court.
Or
Or
they'll go to just they'll say to me, we prefer to, negotiate at mediation. I'm like, "Can we not just settle this with a conversation over a cup of coffee?" And I think we could, 'cause, by the way, you and I are both mediators, or,
Right.
we should have the heart of being able to mediate this. We know this better, and we know it better. We know our clients better. We should know it better. And
Well,
mediation makes a whole bunch of lawyers a whole bunch of money.
right. And I am both a mediator and an attorney that participates in the process. And I am beside myself at the lack of preparedness
Yes.
that attorneys do with their clients going to mediation, that I don't get a mediation statement. That when I'm in a room having a conversation, another attorney's client says, well, no one ever told me that.